Local residents may soon unplug from PG&E. Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to join Community Choice Energy in order to deliver clean, renewable energy to our county. First District Supervisor John Leopold called this move a significant step forward in our efforts to fight climate change. Tonight on Elected Spotlight, we'll talk with Supervisor Leopold about clean energy plan, the millions of dollars heading to Santa Cruz for much-needed road repair, and threats facing our immigrant population. Stay with us. Still goofed up, but we'll just live with it. Welcome, Supervisor Leopold. We're really happy to have you here this evening.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're so welcome. Well, let's start with some good news, road repair.
All right.
So there's a lot of funding coming our way, $6.5 million per year. Can you tell me how many years that is? I couldn't find that information.
Well, there's two actually new sources of funding that we haven't had before. I've been a supervisor for 8 years, and the road repair needs have been escalating each and every year. And last year, in 2016, voters approved Measure D, which was a sales tax measure that included many different transportation pieces, but the largest piece was for our local roads. So I think there was about $135 million over a span of 30 years. For the county roads, the 600 miles that are in the unincorporated area, it'll mean about $2.5 to $3 million a year. So that's fantastic. That alone would have doubled our road budget from what we were able to put in 2015. Then the state legislature decided their first bill of the new legislative session was going to be around transportation funding. And in the first week of April, they did something pretty historic, as they 2/3 of them voted on a new transportation funding bill that increases the gas tax, increases some vehicle license fees, changes the way diesel tax is calculated. But that will mean between $6 and $8 million a year for the county road system, those 600 miles. That doesn't include the cities that we'll have in perpetuity.
Wow.
So that'll be a dramatic increase. In the county system of 600 miles, experts say we need to spend about $12 million a year to maintain a 600-mile road system. So between these two measures and a little bit of money that we had before, we're pretty close to $12 million. So once the money all starts flowing in, because it'll take about a year to everything to start to be in our coffers, we'll be able to make great progress in the repair of our local roads.
So will that help to repair the roads that have been damaged in the storms, or will that be a different fund?
Yeah, you know, it's amazing how you can take one step forward and then two steps back, because after the passage of Measure D, we thought, oh, well, this is a new day. The legislature had just introduced a bill. Thought we've turned the corner. And then this year's storm was the greatest amount of road damage we've had in the history of the county. We're closing between 85 and 100 million by the time it's all done, and that's just for county roads. So luckily the state and federal governments have declared it a natural disaster, so money will be available, but we'll probably need between 10 and 15 million dollars of just local match money. So we'll have to take off a little bit of that new transportation money each year for a couple of years to help pay the local match portion. But my prediction is that in 5 years, we will have the road repairs done from the storm, and all of our other roads will be in much better shape than they are today.
Well, now, so this is a lot of money, and we have to wait a while for it to get here. But how will it be? Is there a plan for prioritizing how the roads will be repaired?
Sure. Well, for the Measure D money, as part of the ballot initiative, each jurisdiction has to come up with a list of what roads they're going to work on in the next 5 years. So each jurisdiction is doing that right now. At our June 6th board meeting, the Board of Supervisors will be voting on a list of roads that we intend to fix in the first 5 years. And then we don't have the same responsibility for the state transportation dollars, but at the county we've reorganized our capital improvement program document, so it's easier to see when people's roads are going to be fixed. And now that we'll have money, there'll be a much more a standard or regular replacement of roads or maintenance of roads than we've ever had before, at least haven't had for many, many years.
Well, it's easier to wait when you know it's coming.
Exactly, exactly. The Measure D also provided other transportation improvements, $100 million to the highway, $100 million to the rail corridor to build both the trail and to maintain the rail line that's there, and also money for the bus system, lift line. So we tried to make progress in all forms of transportation. So no matter how people get around, that they should see improvement in the coming years.
What do you think is the most desirous place to work first? What is the biggest issue?
You mean as in terms of roads? Well, I would say that right now, at least in the district that I represent in the Mid-County, the Soquel-San Jose Road is the road we have to fix because it's a road that so many people use. It's an alternative route for Highway 17. Right now it has a 50-foot deep hole in the middle of it, and we've got to get that road open. So we're working very hard. Hopefully within the month we will start installing a bridge over the hole that's there, and then wait for everything to dry out to figure out how we can do a long-term repair.
That sounds tricky. I drive that road. That's a little windy road.
That is a windy road. We're talking about a 2-lane bridge that will be able to, withstand truck weights. So people will have to drive slightly slower probably because there'll be sides to it. But besides that, they'll be able to keep on moving through there. So that's something we have to do. But really, when you look at both our local roads and in my district, we had a redevelopment agency for 25 years that was able to contribute to the maintenance of the road. We lost that in 2011. So those major arterial and collector streets in the urban area need repair. And then in our rural area, we haven't had money in a long time to really adequately care for those roads, and this money will really help us do that.
Well, we're all looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So speaking of traffic and roads, let's talk a little about the Nissan or the potential Nissan dealership issue. Well, I don't want to call it an issue exactly. So there's a potential. It's potentially a large business going in at 41st and Capitola. And what do you see as you've gotten some pushback on that? What's the status at the moment?
Well, the Nissan dealership owner assembled various pieces of land on the corner of 41st and Soquel to build a dealership. And so he originally put in an application for it. He hadn't assembled all the pieces yet, including a key piece, which was the corner where King's Paint and Paper is right now. And so there were some county staff who I think were trying to rush it through because everybody likes car dealerships because they generate a lot of sales tax. But when you really took a look at it, you have to do an adequate environmental review. So I worked with the staff to make sure that we were going to do that because with such a prominent project, you want to get the process right. And through that process, we'll be able to look at really what the traffic impacts will be and what the mitigations might be to alleviate some of those concerns. And with the addition of that corner property, it gives you some new options. So it'll be interesting to see what the EIR tells us. And it's interesting, the concerns that we have heard have fallen into two areas. One is they're concerned about the traffic that a dealership would generate. The others are concerns about the planning process that we've done called Sustainable Santa Cruz, which looks about increased densities on our major transit corridor. So this corner would fit that. But these two areas are not completely in sync because if we would build a mixed-use project with housing and everything there, it would generate more traffic than a car dealership. So it's hard to have one or the other, or it's hard to have one and the other. And so we're going to have to take a look at that, and we're going to have to make some decisions. The owner is asking for a zoning change, so it'll come to the Board of Supervisors. So we want to, as I say, want to make sure that we have the environmental review necessary, so we have accurate information. We want to look at mitigations to see what makes sense, and we want to make sure we get this choice right.
So the one thing that I read that I would love to have you elaborate on is that there might be a traffic solution with a traffic light.
Sure.
But the traffic light would cost $10 million? Is that
well,
right?
it's not. You have it the numbers a little wrong. In the original mitigation measures that were with this first project before they pulled it to when they had the other properties, they talked about a light at SoCal and Robertson. That would cost $500,000. They also talked about a second left-hand turn lane at SoCal and Porter. That would cost $1 million. The contributions that this project would make would be relatively small, so we'd be left with where will we find the rest of the money. The other complicating factor is that when we've gone out to SoCal residents and we've talked to about transportation issues, and the light at Robertson has come up, fairly consistently they told us that they don't want the light. So because there's a lot of people who want to slow down traffic through SoCal, they don't want to help it go through quicker. And those are competing interests as well. So that's what you want to take a look at. If you can find mitigation measures, both what you can make happen, you have the money to make happen, and are the right ones that both the community want and will alleviate any problems that come up. So that's why we want to do the full environmental review.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. I want to move on now to the electricity option.
Sure.
So it seems that you guys have voted to go ahead.
Sure.
And what are the biggest benefits for people if they have that option?
Well, a couple different things that I would say. First of all, the Board of Supervisors has taken very seriously what we see in terms of climate change and its effect on our community. And several years ago, we did our first climate action strategy, where we looked to see both as what we were doing to contribute to climate change and what the effect was going to be on our community and what were our strategies. And one of the things we saw is the two biggest generators of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, were vehicles. They account about 50%. But the next largest amount of emissions was coming just from our homes and our offices by the electricity that we generate. So the County Board of Supervisors can only do so much to get people out of their cars. And the Measure D that I mentioned earlier will help in moving people out of their cars if they choose to. But when we looked at energy generation, we started looking at strategies that other communities, other counties had used in California, which allowed us to set up our own public utility. And that public utility would use more or all renewable energy than what we currently get from PG&E. Right now, PG&E generates about 30% of their electricity from renewable sources. I think our community values are we want more, and if we can reduce our greenhouse gas emission through that, that becomes important. So we've been working for about 3 years, maybe 4, on something called Community Choice Energy that now we call Monterey Bay Community Power, which is a tri-county effort to form our own utility that would only purchase or mostly purchase renewable energy, and that you would be able to access that through the existing PG&E transmission lines at the same or lower costs. And the money that we would make from it, instead of going into a shareholder's pocket, would go into community projects to promote renewable energies. It might be renewable power generation, solar panels on your house, or we've talked about solar panels on old landfill to be able to help that. It may go towards making homes more energy efficient so they use less energy. So those kind of opportunities seem directly in line with what we care about here in Santa Cruz. So we did a feasibility study. We got a grant for a $350,000 feasibility study. I think 19 of the 21 jurisdictions within the Tri-County area have signed on to this, and they just had their first meeting maybe 2 weeks ago. It's hopeful that within the year that we'll be able to turn on the switch for Monterey Bay Community Power, and it'll be an opt-out program. So if you receive power in Santa Cruz County, you'll be this will be your new power company, and if you choose that you want to still be part of PG&E, you'll be able to opt out of it.
Now, so people do have a choice, and is there and will there be, like PG&E has, an option for low income?
Yes. Many of the same features that you see with PG&E in terms of lifeline service will still be available through Monterey Bay Community Power, and where we choose to put the profits from this could go to a wide range of things. Think of energy efficiency or solar power generation on low-income homes as a way of reducing their power cost. That's another strategy that we could look into as well. So that's community board is going to make those decisions.
So there is one worry that I noted people had brought up was PG&E will be charging people a $10 exit fee per month. Have you figured a solution to that?
Well, that's what they've negotiated as part of state law. So we don't have a lot of control over that, but that's what we're looking at in terms of making sure that what you pay is similar to what you pay now, except that that you're going to get a lot more renewable energy, and you could choose to pay more if you want to get all green energy.
Oh, so there's a tier system.
There's a tier system.
Interesting. Well, so you said within a year you think this will happen?
Yes.
And is that because no one has to build the infrastructure? It's already there. It's just a matter of using
the infrastructure is already there. PG&E will still maintain the infrastructure, and in the event of a storm like we've had this year, PG&E will still fix the lines. And so we don't have to build all the infrastructure necessary. What we're doing right now is building up the board, its policies and procedures, making sure we have the financing to make sure that we can do everything that we need to do as running a utility, and make sure that we have the infrastructure in place, a customer service infrastructure, so when these change happens that people can talk to a real live person or deal with real live people if there's any issues.
Okay. Well, now I want to move a little off the topic of really local and talk a little bit about our immigrant population and the threats that they are facing. There seems to be a great deal of pressure coming from the federal level, and especially the presidency.
Sure.
Can the federal government bring power to bear against Santa Cruz County to cause us to change our regular work here?
Well, this has been an issue for a number of years, as long as I've been as a county supervisor, because President Obama actually deported many more people than any president before him. And he worked to try to get local law enforcement to play a bigger role. Local law enforcement, especially here in California, pushed back. Then they had the Secure Communities program. Santa Clara County was a leader in the state of California to push back on that, and they withdrew their requirements for local law enforcement to participate. With the new Trump administration, his rhetoric is much sharper about this. His desire around immigration are much more severe for people who participate. President Obama was trying to get out people who committed serious crimes. President Trump seems to want to get out anybody who is here illegally. And that's a big change, because that really affects community. We have a large immigrant population. Not all of them are documented here in Santa Cruz County, but they are a critical part of our neighborhoods, of our communities, of our workforce. And so we've resisted any effort for the county to be an agent of the federal government to do their work. We don't have enough money to do everything we need to do. We don't need to start taking on additional responsibilities. The president, in many of his statements, have thought to threaten any cities that have these policies in place. And he signed an executive order, I think in late February or March. Santa Clara County and San Francisco County were the first to sue them on it. Santa Cruz County joined an amicus brief with that lawsuit. And the federal courts have put an injunction in place on doing anything that would affect local communities. Because the Constitution says the state government, the federal government can't make local government do its bidding unless they pay for it. So right now we're in a standoff, but the concerns out in the community are great, both by the statements made by the president and then by the actions of the Santa Cruz Police Department when they engineered a very dramatic raid in Santa Cruz in the middle of February that involved hundreds of agents, helicopters, armored vehicles, flash bombs. Half of those actions took place outside the city of Santa Cruz in Live Oak, the community that I represent, and they were felt by almost everybody in Live Oak because the community's not that large. And it really set back some of the efforts that we were doing to try to get the entire community to be working together on issues of education, health, and public safety. And so our Sheriff Jim Hart has come out very strongly that he is not going to participate in with Department of Homeland Security on raids like this. That he is the first sheriff in California to sign on to SB 54, which would make the entire state of California a sanctuary state. And our board has committed funding for groups like the Santa Cruz Immigration Project to be able to support immigrants here in Santa Cruz County.
Okay, well, let me ask you about kids at school.
Sure.
Are kids at school safe? Are schools a sanctuary in and of themselves?
Historically, they have, and under the Obama administration, they had guidance that schools, health centers, churches were sanctuary spaces, that would not be a place that immigration could go. The Trump administration has refused to make those same assurances, and we have heard horrible stories about immigration officers outside of courts, schools, and health centers. So it really caused a lot of fear. After those raids in February, we had people who were scared to come out of their homes and get food. We actually visited people in homes that didn't have food, but they were scared to go out and get it. So that doesn't make our community safer. That doesn't make our community better. It really causes great strains for all family members, some of whom may be U.S. citizens. It impacts our schools because if those kids don't go to school, the school doesn't get the money. And it impacts our community health because communicable diseases don't honor immigration status. And so you want all people to be able to have access to good medical care so we can maintain good health here in Santa Cruz.
Well, thank you for that.
Sure.
That's really, I think that's information that will be of a relief to many people. But speaking of the president,
Yeah.
and I think we've seen a lot of protests here in Santa Cruz, and,
Sure.
and so it seems that many are opposed to the trends that are happening in Washington.
Right.
And we've seen a lot of our federal representatives say, you know, you really need to work at the grassroots level. You need to start at home.
Sure.
And get, you know, President Obama said, get a clipboard, get some people to sign up, run for office, and, you know, get on the school board, do all those smaller things. As a politician, what would you suggest to local people that they could do that would make the most impact to change things from right here?
Well, it's a great question. You know, a lot of the work that I do is try to get people out of their house and start talking and working together, because when that happens, the community is stronger. So I get a lot of people coming up to me concerned about their future, concerned about the future of their families. They say, what do I do? And I said, you should pick the issue that is meaningful to you and get involved. If that's reproductive rights, if you're concerned about that, we have a local Planned Parenthood or in a reproductive rights network. They are doing actions. They are educating people. Get involved. If you care about civil rights, get involved with the ACLU. They're doing good work here in Santa Cruz, and they can inform you as part of a national network. If you care about the environment, the Sierra Club, Land Trust, the Save Our Shores, these are all great organizations here in Santa Cruz, and we will benefit as a community if people get involved, not only because we are part of a resistance movement to this administration, but we will be a stronger community because we'll have more people working in these very valuable community organizations. So I try to get people to think about what are the things that matter most to them and get involved with those groups.
So it's the passion part that holds you through the long, hard haul.
It has to be. It has to be. People will commit times to things that they're passionate about. If you try to say, well, I need you to care about transportation, but you don't care about transportation, it's not going to go very far. But if you're worried about the future of your children, there are ways, you know, if it's because you're worried about climate change and what the future is going to look like, get involved with the climate change coalition here in Santa Cruz, 350.org. They're all doing local activities to both educate themselves and express their activism in ways that sends a really powerful message to DC.
You were an activist as a young man yourself. Can
Sure.
you talk a little bit about your 3 Mile Island experience?
Sure. Well, I mean, it was a seminal political event in my life when I was 14 years old, and they came into my grade school classroom and they said, "We're going to close the windows because there's been an accident down at 3 Mile Island, which is about 17 miles away." And we evacuated, but that was the first time I saw that there were decisions being made that could affect my future. And I got involved with grassroots community organizing in the anti-nuclear movement. And what's fascinating to me now is, as we mentioned in the earlier subject about community choice energy, that is what we were talking about in 1979 and 80, that we wanted more solar power, more wind power, and the future has become real from our dreams at that time. But through that community organizing activity, it gave me a sense that people really have power. We have stopped any new nuclear power plants from being built in this country since 3 Mile Island. That by working together we can achieve great things. And so when I got into college, I was part of the divestment movement in South Africa. When I came to Santa Cruz, I got involved with lots of community organizations, whether it be around housing or healthcare. Eventually led me to being involved very early on with the HIV and AIDS work that was going on in Santa Cruz County, and eventually the Santa Cruz AIDS Project executive director. So I see myself even now as a supervisor to still be an activist, because you have to go into work every day and say, what are you going to do to help people today, and how can you get people involved in what government is doing?
Well, when you started this, you were 14
Yeah.
In high school. So that's what could you say in just a few seconds to young people in high school that they could make a difference?
Well, they can get out and be involved with the organizations as well. They can get out and express themselves collectively. They can tell either their local representative or their state and federal representatives how they feel about issues. It really does make a difference.
Well, Supervisor John Leopold, thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us on Elected Spotlight. Be sure to join us in July when we'll talk with County Superintendent of Schools Michael Watkins. If you have questions and you'd like to ask Superintendent Watkins, sorry about that, send them to me at bkingreed@communitytv.org. Thank you and good night.